Well guys, it's launch day for the RTX 3080, and chances are your inbox has been inundated by hour long, maybe even 5 minutes, I don't know, videos telling you the performance and giving a full rundown and review of the RTX 3080. That's not what this video is. If you want to see the full-blown review that's nearly 20 pages long, I'll pin it in the comments section as well as the description. A lot of times things get lost in the description, but if I pin it at the comments, you'll be able to go right to it and see various resolutions. So we do 1440, ultra-wide 1440. If you want to see ultra-wide results, I do those, as well as 4K results in traditional rasterized games and ray trace games, and we do compare it over there against the Titan RTX as well as, well, the 1080 and a whole bunch of other cards. But here in this video, we're going to focus on the RTX 3080 and as it relates to you very common 1080 Ti owners, which this is honestly the first time I've gotten a chance to put numbers down for a 1080 Ti on my own. Now I did borrow it from a friend, thank you so much, you know who you are, as well as the Titan RTX. That's in the review, not in here, this one. But the idea behind this video is we're targeting 3080, 2080, 1080 Ti, 1440p, on Ryzen. So we're using our latest test bench build built around the Ryzen 9 3900X, all 12 cores, 4.3 gigahertz, 32 gigs of DDR4 3600 CL17, as well as, well, PCIe Gen 4 drives to load all the games off of. We're having some fun with this one, but the thing, you know, the graphics card is Gen 4, so is the platform, so I figured we'd go with this, although I have a feeling that we could probably get a little bit more performance all around out of the i9-9900K, but we'll maybe do that on another video, as well as go in and talk about the CUDA cores. But real quick, before we jump into the numbers, the specifications of the RTX 3080, rough numbers, 68 SMs with redesigned CUDA core execution units in there, so you're going to get 8,704 of these CUDA cores. It's very interesting how they did this time. Hopefully we can dig into those a little bit later. But we have 272 tensor cores with 68 RT cores, 10 gigabytes of ultra-fast GDDR6X memory running at a total bandwidth of 760 gigabytes per second. Now, it does have a 320 watt TDP, or TGP rather, total graphics power. We'll get to that one at the very end, but let's jump in to the benchmarks. Let's talk about games, how this thing performed. Again, 1440p, first game on the mark. It's probably the least impressive one of the bunch. This is going to be Forza Horizon 4. Running at 174 FPS average with 145 on the 1% percentiles. We see a 25% increase over the 2080 and a 58% increase over the 1080 Ti. Now notice I said that was probably one of the worst performance uplifts. Moving things into Shadow of the Tomb Raider. DX12, highest settings, no ray tracing here. We're looking at 145 FPS. Hitting the very limits of that 144 Hz 1080p or 1440p panel rather. That is a 56% uplift over the 2080 and an 81% uplift over the 1080 Ti. For those wondering. Rainbow Six Siege sees a very similar uplift with 52% uplift from the 2080 and 80% uplift from the 1080 Ti, registering 439 FPS. Quite frankly, I hope you are perfectly fine running that game at 1440p with the 1080 Ti. I just wanted to make sure we had it in there. Now here's a real kicker. Doom Eternal was a game that they showed off quite early, and in our testing, Doom Eternal got 313 FPS at 1440p with the Ultra Nightmare settings, and that is, well, that's a 77% uplift over the 2080 and a 114% uplift over the 1080 Ti. Now, the 2080 and the 1080 Ti ran the game perfectly fine at 1440p. However, that is a huge number for the 3080. Modern Warfare DX12 maximum settings without ray tracing, however, yields us 165 FPS, and a lot of people are playing that game competitively online at 1440p. That's going to push that 144 Hz panel really well with a 54% uplift over the 2080 and a 72% uplift over the 1080 Ti. Resident Evil 3 gets you 181 FPS because 105 and 91 just weren't enough. 72% uplift over the 2080 and a 99% uplift over the 1080 Ti. Borderlands 3 sees about the middle of the road performance increase. We're looking at high settings at 1440p, gets you 122 FPS average, with that making a 56% uplift over the 2080 and a 63% uplift over the 1080 Ti. Now, Modern Warfare DX12 maximum with ray tracing on. No 1080 Ti in these numbers because that's just wrong and unfair. You're looking at 126 FPS on the average, or 77 on the 2080, making for a 64% uplift in performance with ray tracing enabled. It's quite nice. Now what about control? Control with high preset and RTX set to high with DLSS set to quality. So we are using DLSS here. We see 108 FPS on the 3080. That's a 64% uplift over the 66 FPS on the 2080, making for a phenomenally smooth gaming experience. Quake 2 RTX goes up to 78 FPS on the average. Now I get it, Quake 2, you think Quake 2, the game's older, it's older than some of us out here. However, that's a 90% performance improvement. It's 41 FPS on the 2080, 78 on the 3080. That's quite playable and very enjoyable. Now Metro Exodus takes things from 74 up to 101, making for a middling 36% increase. Now that is ultra with Hairworks enabled, tessellation on, and it is using DLSS. Now this is the full-blown global illumination ray tracing, which is quite intense, but you see there the 1% percentiles on the 3080 are higher than the average FPS on the 2080. Now power draw is going to be probably the most interesting thing, is definitely looking like the elephant in the room here. A lot of people are really concerned with the 320 watt power envelope that it operates in. Again, that's going to be a topic for a different day. It's going to be a little bit more discussion in that in the linked review. So go in there, you'll see a bit more things where we talk about performance or watts per frame and all that, just like we talked about in the PCAT video. However, when you're running Forza Horizon 4 at 4K ultra settings, you can see here the GPU load is hitting about 316 watts. That is much higher than what we were getting with the other ones, with a total system power draw of 475 watts with the 3900X and the PCIe Gen 4 drives, all that jazz, 475. And however, if you drop it down and you lock it to 4K 60, we're seeing better numbers than the 1080 Ti as far as what happens to generate 60 FPS in this game. The power required on the GPU is 190 for the 3080. It is lower on the 2080, which is quite interesting. Now the thing to keep in mind here is you are powering much more stuff on the board. So that argument kind of goes out the way when you turn over and you look at control at 1440p with ray tracing turned on, just like we tested it before. You see the GPU load hitting 320 watts over the 218 on the RTX 2080 with a total system load just like it was before. However, if you lock it at 1440-60, I tried 4K 60, but I could not get the 2080 to run 4K 60 in this game, no matter, well, I mean, I could turn the settings all the way down low, but I ended up with the same numbers, so we just left it all the way here. Even with ray tracing off, turns the same. 123 watts on the 3080 as opposed to the 214 watts required on the 2080. It's quite interesting because that's a 43% drop. So what you can see here is at 1440p, well, if you look at the review, you'll see that the uplift is higher at 4K, and it's actually best at 3440 by 1440. If you like ultra wide gaming, this card's going to kill it. Now, if you're coming from the 2080, you're going to see this is probably the first time I've ever had this conversation. See, before, if you had said with a 1080 Ti going to the 2080, I would have been like, you're not really getting a whole lot, but you're getting a substantial performance increase. Now, yeah, it's going to pull more power most of the time, but you're also getting significantly better. The absolute worst we saw was 25%. If that had been the average and the normal, I would have told you guys I wouldn't look at this from a 2080. I would just stick with the 2080. However, we are seeing instances where the performance uplift is so much that it really is like the typical waiting 2 generations worth of uplift from what we've seen over the years. I mean, quite frankly, Turing was good. It just wasn't great for what you got. If you came from a 1080 Ti, you see it here as we went through it. There was an uplift on all these games. I mean, the oldest games in here were the first few that we read out. So all the other ones have come out since Turing's launch. Of course, it gets priority on, optimizations and stuff, but that's just the reality of how things go going forward. And we can see here, if you held on to a 1080 Ti because you were like, I'm okay with spending that level of money, I just want to know that I'm going to get the performance to go along with it. I think if you follow the link and you see the review and you've seen the other reviews, you'll see that this thing runs away from the 1080 or 2080 Ti as well. So yeah, you're running off from last generation's $1,200 card. This is how it's supposed to go, and this is great. We should be happy about this. Power draw, again, is going to be a little bit of a concern for some people, but even at its most, 475 watts for a total system. Guys, we're not talking about you need 1,000 watts. You don't need a 1,000 watt power supply. I don't know that I'd run it on a 550. I think a 650 watt or better, if you're gonna leave it alone, is gonna be fine. If you check the results for overclocking, they're down in there. We're gonna spend some more time with overclocking and see just where the sweet spot is and how that works. One quick note before we get out of here, I don't think I meant to mention it. Thermals on all these Founders Edition cards, 1080 Ti got up to 84 Celsius while running. It is a little bit noisy. It's a blower card, what do you expect? 2080, 74, pretty cool, ran good. The 3080, 77C. It's a 320 watt card, 77C. Now that wasn't an open air test bench. However, right behind me, I'll try and turn here, is an ITX system with an H210i that I stuffed it into. And the CPU temperature rose up about a couple degrees more than it did with the 2080. And the GPU got up to 82, but it was still really quiet. So I hope you take the time to look at the full review. I hope this condensed version of a very focused look for those guys out there with the 1080 Ti and the 2080 at 1440p, because this card is going to destroy 1440p in the best kind of way. You're gonna be able to run 4K with no problem. I go down. I said 4K gaming is out, is it's a pipe dream for quite some time still. Not quite the case anymore. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got something out of it. If you did, let us know. If you liked it, subscribe, like, do all that jazz, and we'll catch you all in the next one.